Curriculum evaluation. What is evaluation?
Evaluation is the process of collecting data on a program to determine its value or worth with the aim of deciding whether to adopt, reject, or revise the program.
Programs are evaluated to answer questions and concerns of various parties.
The public want to know whether the curriculum implemented has achieved its aims and objectives. Teachers want to know whether what they are doing in the classroom is effective. The developer or planner wants to know how to improve the curriculum product.
McNeil states that curriculum evaluation is an attempt to throw light onto questions.
Do plan learning opportunities, programs, courses and activities as developed and organized actually produce desired results?
How can the curriculum offerings best be improved?
Bernstein and Hunkins define curriculum evaluation as a process or cluster of processes that people perform in order to gather data that will enable them to decide whether to accept, change or eliminate something, the curriculum in general or an educational textbook in particular.
Worthen and Sanders define curriculum evaluation as the formal determination of the quality, effectiveness or value of a program, product, project, process, objective or curriculum.
Bay argues that the aim of curriculum evaluation is to identify its weaknesses and strengths as well as problems encountered in implementation, to improve the curriculum development process, to determine the effectiveness of the curriculum and the returns on finance allocated.
Oliver defined curriculum evaluation as the process of delineating, obtaining, and providing useful information for judging decision alternatives. The primary decision alternatives to consider based upon the evaluation results are to maintain the curriculum as is, to modify the curriculum, or to eliminate the curriculum.
Evaluation is a disciplined inquiry to determine the worth of things.
Things may include programs, procedures or objects. Generally, research and evaluation are different even though similar data collection tools may be used.
The three dimensions on which they may differ are:
First, evaluation need not have as its objective the generation of knowledge. Evaluation is applied while research tends to be basic.
Second, evaluation presumably produces information that is used to make decisions or forms the basis of policy. Evaluation yields information that has immediate use while research need not.
Third, evaluation is a judgment of worth. Evaluation results in value judgments while research need not and some would say should not.
Curriculum evaluation models.
How should you go about evaluating curriculum?
Several experts have proposed different models describing how and what should be involved in evaluating a curriculum.
Models are useful because they help you define the parameters of an evaluation, what concepts to study and the procedures to be used to extract important data. Numerous evaluation models have been proposed, but three models are discussed here.
Context, input, process, product model, CIPP model.
Daniel L. Studfelbeam, who chaired the Phi Delta Kappa National Study Committee on Evaluation, introduced a widely cited model of evaluation known as the CIP, Context, Input, Process and Product model.
The approach when applied to education aims to determine if a particular educational effort has resulted in a positive change in school, college, university or training organization.
A major aspect of Studfelbeam's model is centered on decision-making or an act of making up one's mind about the program.
for evaluations to be done correctly and aid in the decision-making process, curriculum evaluators have to
first delineate what is to be evaluated and determine what information has to be collected. For instance, how effective the new science program has been in enhancing the scientific thinking skills of children in the primary grades.
Second is to obtain or collect the information using selected techniques and methods. For instance, interview teachers, collect test scores of students, and
third is to provide or make available the information in the form of tables or graphs to interested parties. To decide whether to maintain, modify or eliminate the new curriculum or program, information is obtained by conducting the following 4 types of evaluation: context, input, process and product.
Stufflebeam's model of evaluation relies on both formative and summative evaluation to determine the overall effectiveness of a curriculum program. Evaluation is required at all levels of the program implemented.
Context evaluation. What needs to be done, and in what context?
This is the most basic kind of evaluation with the purpose of providing a rationale for the objectives.
The evaluator defines the environment in which the curriculum is implemented, which could be a classroom, school or training department.
The evaluator determines needs that were not met and reasons why the needs are not being met.
Also identify the shortcomings and problems in the organization under review. For instance, a sizable proportion of students in secondary schools are unable to read at the desired level, the ratio of students to computers is large, a sizable proportion of science teachers are not proficient to teach in English.
Goals and objectives are specified on the basis of context evaluation. In other words, the evaluator determines the background in which the innovations are being implemented.
The techniques of data collection would include observation of conditions in the school, background statistics of teachers and interviews with players involved in the implementation of the curriculum.
Input evaluation. How should it be done?
Is to provide information in determining how to utilize resources to achieve objectives of the curriculum. The resources of the school and various designs for carrying out the curriculum are considered.
At this stage, the evaluator decides on procedures to be used. Unfortunately, methods for input evaluation are lacking in education. The prevalent practices include committee deliberations, appeal to professional literature, the employment of consultants and pilot experimental projects.
Process evaluation. Is it being done?
Is the provision of periodic feedback while the curriculum is being implemented.
Product evaluation. Did it succeed?
Or outcomes of the initiative. Data is collected to determine whether the curriculum managed to accomplish what it set out to achieve. For instance, to what extent students have developed a more positive attitude towards science. Product evaluation involves measuring the achievement of objectives, interpreting the data and providing information that will enable them to decide whether to continue, terminate or modify the new curriculum.
For example, product evaluation might reveal that students have become more interested in science and are more positive towards the subject after introduction of the new science curriculum. Based on these findings, the decision may be made to implement the program throughout the country. What is the difference between context evaluation and Input evaluation according to the SIP model. Give specific examples.
What is the difference between process evaluation and product evaluation according to the SIP mode? Give specific examples.
Stakes countenance model.
The model proposed by Robert Warsteg suggests 3 phases of curriculum evaluation.
The antecedent phase, the transaction phase and the outcome phase. The antecedent phase includes conditions existing prior to instruction that may relate to outcomes.
The transaction phase constitutes the process of instruction while the outcome phase relates to the effects of the program. Stake emphasizes 2 operations: descriptions and judgments.
Descriptions are divided according to whether they refer to what was intended or what actually was observed. Judgments are separated according to whether they refer to standards used in arriving at the judgments or to the actual judgments.
Eisner's connoisseurship model.
Elliot Eisner, a well-known art educator, argued that learning was too complex to be broken down to a list of objectives and measured quantitatively to determine whether it has taken place.
He argued that the teaching of small manageable pieces of information prohibits students from putting the pieces back together and applying them to new situations. As long as we evaluate students based on the small bits of information, students will only learn small bits of information.
Eisner contends that evaluation has and will always drive the curriculum. If we want students to be able to solve problems and think critically, then we must evaluate problem solving and critical thinking, skills which cannot be learned by rote practice.
So, to evaluate a program we must make an attempt to capture the richness and complexity of classroom events.
He proposed the connoisseurship model, in which he claimed that a knowledgeable evaluator can determine whether a curriculum program has been successful, using a combination of skills and experience.
The word connoisseurship comes from the Latin word cognoscere, meaning to know. For example, to be a connoisseur of food, paintings or films, you must have knowledge about and experience with different types of food, paintings or films, before you're able to criticize.
To be a food critic, you must be a connoisseur of different kinds of foods. To be a critic, you must be aware and appreciate the subtle differences in the phenomenon you are examining. In other words, the curriculum evaluator must seek to be an educational critic. When employing the procedure of educational criticism, the following questions may be asked. What has happened in the classrooms as a result of implementation of the new curriculum?
What are some of the events that took place? For instance, more students are participating in field work, more students are asking questions in class, even academically weak students are talking in group activities.
How did students and teachers organize themselves in these events?
What were the reactions of participants in these events? For instance, students enjoyed working collaboratively in projects.
How can the experiences of learners be made more effective as suggested by students, teachers and administrators?
For instance, more resources are needed for fieldwork. More computers are needed to integrate the internet in teaching and learning.
You will notice that these questions place more emphasis on the process of learning and the quality of experiences by those involved in the implementation of the curriculum, namely, students, teachers and administrators.
According to the connoisseurship model, evaluators provide a description and interpretation of the curriculum plan implemented.
Description.
The evaluator records the actions, the features of the environment and experiences of students, teachers and administrators. People who read the evaluation report will be able to visualize what the place looks like and the processes taking place.
The aim here is to help the reader see the school or classroom and get a feel of what the curriculum evaluator or critic is attempting to understand and help others understand.
Interpretation.
The evaluator explains the meaning of events reported by putting it in its context. For example, why academically weak students were motivated to ask questions. Why reading comprehension skills improved. Why enthusiasm for doing science experiments increased, and so forth.
To be able to describe and interpret the implementation of a curriculum, the evaluator has to collect data, and the following are examples of activities an evaluator may engage in.
The evaluator observes what is going on in the classroom and records teachers and students in action using videotapes, audiotapes and photographs.
The evaluator keeps notes of what is done, what is said and more importantly what is not said. The evaluator should strive to describe the tone of the curriculum in action.
The evaluator interviews students, teachers and administrators about the quality of the curriculum.
The evaluator would analyze the student's work.
One of the great benefits of Elliot W. Eisner's activities has been the way in which he has both made the case for a concern with connoisseurship and criticism, and mediated these concerns for educators and researchers.
The importance of his advocacy of these ideas cannot be underestimated, especially at a time when rather narrow concerns with instrumental outcomes and an orientation to the technical dominate.
Together they offer educators a more helpful and appropriate means to approach evaluation, for example,
advocating moving beyond technocratic and behavioristic modes of thinking and having a concern for expressive outcomes.
Calling to attend to fundamentals. Eisner has consistently warned against educational facts and fashion. He has criticized dominant paradigms and invited educators and others to ask questions such as what is basic in education,
arguing that schools should help children create meaning from experience, and that this requires an education devoted to the senses, to meaning-making and the imagination.
Eisner argues for a curriculum that fosters multiple literacies in students, especially by looking to non-verbal modes of learning and expression, and a deepening of the artistry of teachers.
Over the time that Eisner has been writing, there have been significant shifts in the context in which schools have to operate.
While there have been other voices calling for changes in the culture of schooling, notably Howard Gardner in this arena, the impact of globalization, growing centralization in many schooling systems, reaction against more process-oriented forms of pedagogy and a growing instrumentalism education have served to make Eisner's message both more pertinent to schools and more difficult to respond to.
Phases of curriculum evaluation.
Table shows the phases of curriculum evaluation.
Instrumentation for curriculum evaluation.
No matter what evaluation model is used in evaluating a curriculum, the methods of data collection and the instruments used are more or less similar.
The common instruments used in curriculum evaluation are interviews, observations, tests, survey, content analysis and portfolios, record of work or products.
Questionnaires and checklists.
When you need to quickly and/or easily get lots of information from people in a non-threatening way, questionnaires and checklists are useful data collection techniques.
Questionnaires and checklists can be completed anonymously and are relatively inexpensive to administer. Since the data collected is quantitative, it is easy to compare and analyze and can be administered to many people.
A massive amount of data can be obtained. It is also easy to design as there are many sample questionnaires already in existence.
However, the information obtained may not be accurate as it relies on how truthfully subjects respond to the questions.
There is also that fear that the wordings used can bias a client's responses. Questionnaires are impersonal, and we may not get the full story since only a sample of subjects is given the instrument.
Interviews.
Interviews are usually one-on-one situations in which an individual asks questions to which a second individual, which may be a teacher, principal, student, parent, responds.
The person asking the questions is called the interviewer, while the person giving answers to the questions is called the interviewee.
Interviews are used when you want to fully understand someone's impressions or experiences, or learn more about their answers to questionnaires.
There are two general types of interviews, depending on the extent to which the responses required are unstructured or structured.
In an unstructured interview, the interviewer does not follow a rigid script and there is a great deal of flexibility in the responses.
For example, why do you think the recommended textbook for the course is difficult for low ability learners? The teacher responding to such a question will give a variety of reasons.
Some of the reasons given may be of a general nature while others may be specific to certain sections of the textbook.
This makes the task of keeping track of responses more difficult. The open-endedness of the question will require that the interviewer record all responses and make sense of it later.
The advantage of the unstructured interview is that it allows the evaluator to gather a variety of information, especially in relation to the interviewee's knowledge, beliefs or feelings toward a particular situation.
In a structured interview, the questions asked usually require very specific responses.
For example, is the recommended textbook difficult for low ability learners because there is too much content, the language use is beyond the comprehension of low ability learners, or there is too few examples and illustrations.
Regardless of which type of interview is used, evaluators should ensure that each question is relevant for its intended purpose.
In the end, the data must be translated into a form that can be analyzed, and this has to be done carefully to preserve accuracy and to maintain the sense of the data.
The advantage of interviews is that it can get a full range and depth of information. It develops a relationship with teachers and students, and it is more flexible.
However, interviews may take up too much time and cost, and can be hard to analyze and compare. Furthermore, an interviewer could be biased against a client's responses.
Observations.
Observations are about gathering accurate information about how a program is actually operating, in particular, its processes.
Documents.
We look at documentation when we want an impression of how a program is operating without interrupting the program itself. Table shows the advantages of each method as well as the challenges involved.
Identify some problems in the implementation of the Primary School Integrated Curriculum, KBSR, and the Secondary School Integrated Curriculum, KBSM.
Describe how the teaching of science and mathematics in English was implemented in your school. New curriculum often fails to become established in schools because the importance and complexity of the implementation phase is not understood. Discuss.